Hello and welcome back to TriggerSmart. If you haven't heard, Candace Owens is now being sued in a defamation lawsuit from Brian Harpole. He was the head of security for Charlie Kirk, and he was there the day that he was assassinated. Let's look into it. It does seem apparently that this Matt Sarelson, Esquire, celebrity attorney and advisor, is the one who actually filed it. So he says here, on behalf of Brian Harpole, I filed this defamation lawsuit against Candace Owens and Mitchell Snow, apparently as well. This might have something to do with Fort Huachuca. I have not actually looked at this yet, so you'll be seeing it at the same time as I do. We will not be providing any other statements. You can follow me for updates. And here you can see United States District Court for the Middle District of Tennessee, Brian Harpole, the plaintiff, versus Candace Owens LLC, George Tom, which I don't know if this is her husband's incorporation or not, and then also Mitchell Snow. And it looks like Brian Harpole is suing Candace Owens, George Tom, and Mitchell Snow for defamation and conspiracy to defame. Okay, so it's a defamation lawsuit. Candace Owens, a wealthy, influential, and well-known conspiracy theorist with a massive social media following. I think as of to date, she has multiple million. Falsely accused Brian Harpole of conspiring to assassinate Charlie Kirk. She did so in coordination with Mitchell Snow, who fed Owens a completely and obvious fabricated story that Brian Harpole met with Army intelligence officers and Erica Kirk, Charlie's now widow, at Fort Huachuca to plan the murder. Unsurprisingly, this lawsuit follows. So yes, so this is about the Fort Huachuca story, where maybe there was some kind of connection between the two. And, you know, again, guys, like, giving your opinion on this stuff is fine. It's when you say things definitively and saying that it's factual that it becomes a problem. But let's see what else we have here. It says the venue is proper because the defendants, Candace and George Tom, reside in that district. It says Brian Harpole is a citizen and resident of Texas. He's the founder and head of Integrity Security Solutions, a private security firm. In 2018, Harpole began working for late Charlie Kirk with Integrity Solutions, providing security for Turning Point USA and protective services for Kirk from 2022 to 2025. Integrity Solutions provided these services for Turning Point USA and Charlie Kirk at Utah Valley University on September 10th, which is where Kirk was fatally shot, or like a lot of people believe, he was fatally killed, right? Not necessarily shot. Harpole seeks damages in excess of $75,000 on his behalf and on behalf of his closely held company, Integrity Solutions. So initially I heard he was suing for millions. Candace Owens is a citizen of Williamson County, Tennessee. She's a public commentator, podcaster, and social media influencer with a substantial following on platforms including X and YouTube. She is neither a journalist nor a reporter. She publishes content through her podcast and X account at Real Candace O. She's host of her podcast Candace, which is published on YouTube, Real Candace O, Rumble, etc., etc. Candace Owens LLC is a Delaware limited liability company with its principal place of business in Tennessee. We've heard lots of things about Delaware. The people use Delaware for certain reasons to get around certain laws and taxes and things like that. I'm not saying that's what she's doing necessarily, but I think that's interesting because that's the first time I've seen that. Owens is the sole member and manager of Candace Owens LLC and resides in William County, Tennessee. She has exclusive control over all this stuff, is what it's saying. And it says that she controls the account that has published several defamatory posts about Brian Harpole. It also says defendant George Tom is a Delaware corporation, business in Tennessee. Owens made false and defamatory statements on her podcast, Candace. In addition to publishing on YouTube, she also published to her website, CandaceOwens.com, which is operated by George Tom Inc. So it looks like maybe her husband owns the rights to this stuff or something similar. I'm not quite sure. Owens oversees and directs all content that George Tom Inc. publishes on CandaceOwens.com. Owens is the sole or majority shareholder of George Tom Inc. Then it says Mitchell Snow is a resident of Washington State. The court has personal jurisdiction over him because he purposefully availed himself of the laws of Tennessee on at least 3 separate occasions. On December 8th, 2025, Snow spoke with Owens, a Tennessee resident, fed her a false story that Harpole was involved in a top-secret meeting with high-ranking military officials involving a plot to assassinate Charlie Kirk, and authorized Owens to tell his false story on her podcast, which is filmed and recorded in Tennessee. So that's the loophole. So Mitchell, they're saying in this case, is part of this, not only because of his testimony and what he said, but also because it was filmed in Tennessee and he was physically there. That's interesting. Also, at some point after December 9th, but before December 18th, Snow and Owens communicated a second time for the purpose of scheduling and coordinating Snow's December 18th appearance. And then on December 18th, Snow appeared on the podcast. As a direct result of his appearance on Owens' podcast, Snow caused Harpole reputational and other injury in Tennessee. Moreover, exercising jurisdiction over Snow does not offend traditional notions of fair and play and substantial justice because he could have and reasonably should have foreseen being hauled into a Tennessee federal court after he communicated with Owens, a Tennessee resident. Alternatively, even if Snow's direct individual contacts with Tennessee are deemed insufficient on their own, this court possesses personal jurisdiction over Snow under a theory of specific personal jurisdiction based on conspiracy liability. This goes on to say that Snow entered into a conspiracy with Owens for the express purpose of engaging in a coordinated and deliberate campaign designed to defame Harpole and ruin his reputation. Owens and Snow agreed that Owens would use her network, including her podcast, website, and social media accounts, all of which are controlled by Candace Owens or George Tom, to promote and publish Snow's fallacious narrative that Harpole was involved in a plan with the United States to have Kirk assassinated. Again, this goes back to the meeting where there was supposedly some military personnel, and Mitch Snow basically thought that he saw possibly Erica Kirk, Cabot Phillips, Brian Harpole there, and this is kind of building off of that, right? What I've done is I've had Grok summarize this because this is a 69-page document, and Matt Sarelson has made this available for people. They said they can follow him for more updates, and also it's made available here in this document that he has linked here on his account on X, so you can check it out there. And this is it, but instead of reading through every single detail of it there, I had it summarized, and we're going to go through it here. So again, this is that 69-page document. This is for Brian Harpole suing for defamation against Mitch Snow and Candace Owens, as well as a few companies associated with Candace Owens. And it says Brian Harpole says his details about when he was doing security for Charlie Kirk, and he was also a security when he got shot. Candace Owens LLC, George Tom Inc., and Mitchell Snow are the defendants. The core allegations is defamation based on this meeting in Fort Huachuca story that came from Mitchell Snow. He claims in the complaint, the statements are completely false and were made with knowledge of their falsity or reckless disregard for the truth. So they're claiming actual malice in this case. Owens is not a journalist and acted as a conspiracy theorist with a large following. So because of her following size, that is also a big piece of this. The defamation caused severe reputational harm, emotional distress, and business damages to Harpole and his company. Snow conspired to provide the false info and authorizing its use on Owens' Tennessee-based podcast. And they also say since he traveled there and was on her podcast physically, that puts him basically in the eye of this Tennessee case. And it says the relief that is sought. The plaintiff demands a jury trial, compensatory and punitive damages, attorney's fees, and other relief for defamation per se, defamation, and civil conspiracy. This is the initial complaint, not yet answered or litigated. It stems from public controversy after Charlie Kirk's 2025 assassination, where Owens promoted various theories implicating Harpole and others connected to TPUSA. And then it goes into the way that her podcast works, how she streams it, how many people typically watch it. It's pretty detailed. It gets down to her X posts and the engagement and how many views it typically gets. Talks about malicious conspiracies previously that are baseless, including Bridget Macron, the First Lady of France, being transgender, that the moon landing was fake, and a slew of anti-Semitic conspiracies, including but not limited to the Shabbat Lubavitch, a sect of Hasidic Jewry. The fact that it's dangerous, she says, and responsible for the Iran war. All this stuff, right? So basically everything that she's saying on her channel, I guess it depends on how she says it or how she shares it, but they're pulling out several things. So they're not just saying that the issue is just this specific lawsuit and specifically what she said about him, but just in general, they say that these different conspiracies and things are coming out of her channel. And they put specific references to specific episodes of YouTube channels. And then they have direct references to those specific videos. They have some screenshots. So here, Candace Owens saying you murdered 3,000 Americans on 9/11 for starters, responding to this person here. And, just stuff like this. They have a bunch of them lined up. Candace Owens, remember you're digging tunnels in New York and in cities across America. They're taking over entire towns in New Jersey. Just basically giving her opinion on what she thinks is going on with this stuff here. And, it looks like they have several. And that might be why this is 69 pages, because there's a lot of information here. And then they do a little snippet here talking about Charlie Kirk being assassinated at UVU. They talk about Tyler Robinson being the assassin and basically saying that there's no evidence that shows that he worked with any other person or entity. It says that Brian Harpole and his company, Integrity Security Solutions, did not have foreknowledge of and were not involved in or act negligently with respect to or participated in any cover-up of the assassination. And then they go to say the lack of evidence and foul play and that stuff did not prevent conspiracy theories surrounding the assassination. Commonly spread theories include the existence of a second shooter, trapdoor, tunnel system. Kirk was killed by a small explosive instead of a bullet. UVU's quick deconstruction of the crime scene was to cover up a conspiracy. The United States government intended to assassinate Kirk with Harpole involved in the alleged scheme. So basically, I mean, they're covering a decent amount of all the theories and stuff that are out there, you know. And the reason these theories are here is because no one got answers to anything. They're just in a holding pattern waiting to see what the evidence is in court. And then we can see here as well, we have Blake Bednar's in here, and he's calling him out specifically. His name is Brian Harpole. He's saying the detonator trigger is under the shirt, below his armpit, along upper rib cage. So, you know, basically he's saying step by step how Brian Harpole pulled the trigger mechanism or something similar to detonate something. The remote control is in his front right pant pocket. This is what caused the audio interference. So they're not just referencing Mitch Snow and Candace Owens. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people that are referenced in here. But as you go down, you see some more stuff. Blake, watch the guy in the blue shirt, Brian Harpole. For me, it's not natural at all. His right hand is gripping the explosive trigger, which is concealed under his shirt. So as you can see, I mean, they dug pretty deep for this. Shortly after the assassination, Owens began disseminating content asserting that Kirk was betrayed by individuals close to him, that the government orchestrated a cover-up of the assassination. And it keeps going into more examples. I think I've been pretty clear from the beginning that Charlie was set up. Owens has likewise labeled the post-shooting behavior of Kirk's security team as shady. She said then they put down papers almost immediately. So I think what they're saying here is that a majority of the information that has come out kind of feeding the different conspiracies and things that are out there and the different theories that everyone has originated with Candace. I think that's kind of what a lot of this is kind of saying. And it talks about Harpole being on the Sean Ryan's show to respond to and rebut the defamatory statements. And as we know, a lot of people after that show on Sean Ryan, it actually seemed to make things worse for Brian Harpole because people didn't believe him at all. So that actually was probably the worst thing he could do was do those interviews. But I get what they're saying here, so let's keep moving. They also talk about him being interviewed by Gary Melton on Paramount Tactical, also to rebut defamatory statements. They have more references here for Candace and YouTube videos, so they basically have everything itemized out. It says despite Harpole's 2 appearances, he remains a private individual and not a limited purpose public figure. On his social accounts he doesn't use for posting content, he has no public platforms to effectively rebut or counteract statements. Okay, so they're saying that he has no way to jump on X or YouTube or Rumble and defend anything that's being said about him. Should the defendants claim Harpole is a public figure or a public figure for a limited purpose, Harpole expressly preserves his right to allege and prove actual malice. Harpole's attempt to rebut Owens' defamatory statements soon proved fruitless, as the very next day Owens stated on her podcast that Harpole should be fired due to his purported failure to ensure adequate perimeter security during Kirk's speech. She additionally claimed that after the shooting, Harpole ran over Kirk with his small, supposed-to-be medical bag, and that he lied about drone availability, with Owens asking, is this how the assassinations happen? And then they get into more details. They cover, you know, different parts of the episode, specific things that were said, different quotes. And then they specifically talk about the credible tip from a former military member, and this is referring to Harry Myers, or Mitch Snow, as people know him as, claiming that he inadvertently entered a classified meeting at Fort Huachuca on September 9th, the day before Charlie Kirk's assassination, observed senior government officials in attendance, and that following the assassination, identified Harpole as one of the individuals that was present for that meeting. And of course, I have more references here. Today on the show, I received the shocking information which puts Charlie's last trip to Asia in a new light, and it involves his security detail, Brian Harpole. This will shock your senses, but I feel this information must be presented. Join us live. And it says, despite the verifiable falsity of her statements, Owens' viewers and supporters understood via responses that she was claiming that Harpole conspired with the Trump administration to assassinate Kirk. And then here they're showing examples of people that are saying things based on what they saw on her show. So like here we have, let's not forget that Brian Harpole is the guy who did not secure the staircase to the roof and told us that Dan Flood did not make any hand signals, although he clearly did. Brian Harpole made a mistake advising they did not use call signs 910. Even Sean Ryan, who I don't fully trust, was taken aback because he assumed that he was looking at were active call signs. Jennifer Freedom, Charlie's camp was full of bad actors. I find it hard to believe he kept company with these fools. Why was Brian Harpole leaving a military operation meeting days before Charlie's assassination? This is absolutely wild, and it needs answers. So what this suit is saying is that her influence from her large audience, millions of people, has affected a lot of other people, and then those people are basically parroting what she's saying and adding more to it and starting other rumors and other theories. And also, they're saying that Mitch Snow in his story also fed that. It also goes on to say that despite accusing Harpole of lying, Owens failed to specify any statements by Harpole that were allegedly false and presented no evidence to support her conclusion that Harpole lied about the events of September 10th, 2025. On Owens' December 16th, 2025 podcast, Owens brazenly stated that she has not received a cease and desist letter from Kirk's security team and that the team has no basis on to sue her. I mean, the audacity that you're filing a lawsuit and someone got murdered on your watch. Upon information and belief, defendant made the foregoing statement with the intent to provoke or challenge plaintiff into taking legal action against her. And then they show the reference to when he was on. They talk about Fort Huachuca. And speaking of the Fort Huachuca meeting, you'll never guess what sort of military and civilian assets they train. And she, just kind of kept following that thread and kept tugging on it. On December 17th, apparently fearing a lawsuit, Owens reached out to Harpole asking if he wanted to have an off-the-record discussion. Harpole did not respond. And this is that actual text. Hi, Brian. This is Candace Owens. A lot of people telling me that you're planting seeds regarding a lawsuit. Wanted to see if you wanted to have an off-record discussion with me about anything, or if you'd like to simply clarify something that you think I got wrong. Owens then used Harpole's silence to further defame him. Owens implied Harpole's failure to respond to her text message as suspicious. She then reached out again on December 19th. Hey, Brian, just again reaching out in case you want to clarify your whereabouts on the morning on September 9th. I'm only interested in the truth, so I'd be happy to debunk Mitch if he perhaps is misremembering the faces he saw. And then it goes on to talk about how Owens confirmed on X that she had viewed Brian Harpole's flight records, and she incorrectly stated that they do not provide an alibi for him at 7:30 a.m., which is when the alleged meeting concluded at Fort Huachuca. And then it looks like it talks about people saying that Gary Melton and those guys basically took down Mitch Snow as being some kind of horrible person or whatever. But then it also shows how Mitch's son basically proved them right, that Mitch was at Fort Huachuca. Then it has Candace and Barron here. He has put a lot of work to confirm the Fort Huachuca story, and for that, we thank him. Barron says, has anyone done more the past few days to support the story Candace is putting forward than Gary from Paramount Tactical? First, he confirmed Andrew Kovac as directing the coordinated Fed slot response, and the next day confirmed Mitch Snow was at Fort Huachuca. Despite confirming she had viewed Harpole's flight records, Owens' followers clearly understood her post to mean that Brian Harpole had been at Fort Huachuca and involved in a conspiracy to assassinate Kirk. And then they show some more examples of people kind of pulling on that thread again. Then it says, sensing that her Fort Huachuca theory was slowly falling apart, Owens pivoted back to spreading misinformation regarding Harpole's fitness as Kirk's head of security and his role in Kirk's assassination. She then played a clip of Harpole's lone podcast appearance where he explains the process he and his team went through ahead of Kirk's engagement at UVU. In the clip, Harpole explained that his team began gathering intel and getting permits at least 2 weeks in advance. It says that Candace provided no name, qualifications, or other proof that the individual was involved in planning Kirk's security detail for the event at Charis Bible College. I think this might be the event the next day. Yeah, the September 11th event. That it was said that there was no security or anything planned for that day. It says Harpole did not coordinate with Charis, I'm not sure how you say that, Bible College nor the Woodland Police Department because he was not advised that Charlie would be visiting the school. It was not uncommon for Charlie to visit universities with only Dan Flood. And then it shows some more posts, like this one says, I'm sorry, but Brian Harpole not making any security preparations the next day is confirmation he was part of the conspiracy. It says, while thousands of Owens followers supported her efforts to promote unsubstantiated claims, others encouraged her to exercise caution. She ignored their pleas. Then they showed Deborah saying, yes, the document is real. No, the timeline isn't. The name morphs from Harry, Mitch, Michael. There's no visible case number. And what we're shown is a photo of a screen in edit mode. And the big takeaway, a guy with PTSD in a backpack wandered where he shouldn't have and alarmed MPs. Not exactly the cinematic whistleblower saga we were promised. Bryson says, so to be clear, he landed in Dallas 5 a.m. September 8th, found a way to Arizona, and back to Dallas before 12 p.m. September 9th. And we have some other people that are trying to debunk based on drive time and things like that as well. This one here says, you keep using the word factual, yet you provided zero verifiable evidence to support that claim. You do understand that facts require evidence, right? Simply asserting something doesn't make it true. And it just goes on and on and on. We have more posts from a lot of other people. We have some people saying Brian Harpole pushed the button that blew the mic under his shirt and electrocuted Charlie with his handheld mic, arrested Brian Harpole. So they're basically just showing that the influence from the podcast initially basically spawned all these other accounts on X and YouTube and other places to run with it and take it further. We have one here that says a crowd full of students standing with a pathetic liar and psychopath criminal that had Charlie Kirk killed. Blake Bednar's videos don't lie, Erica. You folks do. The world knows the truth. Tyler didn't do it. You know that. We know that. Brian Harpole needs to be arrested ASAP. In light of the above, Harpole is entitled to actual and punitive damages in the amount to be determined at trial. A reasonable award is well into the millions of dollars. So initially this says $75,000 at the beginning, unless I was misunderstanding that. But they're saying here a reasonable award is millions. So it looks like they're looking to basically retire off of this one. And we have count 1, which is defamation. And we've kind of walked through the defamation piece of that. And then we have count 2 is defamation regarding professional unfitness. So saying that he's not able to do his job. And then count 3, false light invasion of privacy. It says by consistently and relentlessly painting Brian Harpole as a liar, murderer, and conspirator, and disparaging him to anybody who would listen, Owens has placed him in a highly offensive false light. Such allegations would be highly offensive to any reasonable person. And then we have count 4, defamation again. In this case, this is against Mitch Snow. And then we have count 5, civil conspiracy to defame. This is against Mitch and Candace and the LLCs as well. The element for cause of action for civil conspiracy are a common design between 2 or more persons to accomplish by concerted action an unlawful purpose or lawful purpose by unlawful means, an overt act in furtherance of the conspiracy and resulting injury. Count 6, aiding and abetting defamation. As alleged above on at least 2 separate occasions, Snow publishes the false and defamatory narrative that Harpole attended a top-secret meeting with high-ranking military members at Fort Huachuca on September 9th, 2025, as part of a plot to assassinate Charlie Kirk. Snow spread his fallacious story about Harpole when he told Owens that he saw Harpole leaving a meeting with multiple lieutenant colonels, which he described as a meeting held when an operation is being confirmed, as in the operation had been given the green light and these guys were just getting ready to carry it out, basically. He further explained, you have these final meetings, and they involve all the higher-ups, and you're trying to do this in a very isolated location where you know people are not going to accidentally happen upon you. Snow further defamed Harpole when he appeared on Owens' podcast and directly told Owens' audience his false account of seeing Harpole at Fort Huachuca. And it gets very much into the minor details of everything, of every video, every text, everything they said, all the allegations. Harpole demands a jury trial on all counts, so triable, and a prayer for relief. Enters a judgment in his favor against, jointly and severally, defendants Candace Owens LLC, Georgetown Inc., and Mitchell Snow. All right, so there you go. I mean, the document itself isn't super exciting. They're not supposed to be. But basically what's happening is Mitch Snow, Candace Owens, they're being sued for defamation against Brian Harpole. It also looks like some other people are listed in there as well that were influenced by Candace Owens, supposedly from her podcast. She has the wide reach, and it was basically showing the effect of her saying, hey, I saw this thing happened, allegedly or whatever, and then other people would run with it and make videos and posts and everything on it. So that is what's happening right now, and I don't know where this is going to go. I don't know if it's going to become a big thing. I don't know if they're going to settle outside of court or what might happen. I mean, anything could happen at this point. We know that Candace Owens is no stranger to being sued, but we'll see where things go. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Do you think that this suit is legitimate? Do you think that Brian Harpole is in the right bringing this defamation lawsuit against Mitch Snow and Candace Owens for the Fort Huachuca story that was broadcast on her YouTube channel? And as always, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this around. And if you want to support the channel, there are ways to do so down in the description below. And I'll see you on the next one.